right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. So good evening and welcome to our living room lecture series. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we have Block 112, The Untold Story of San Diego's Working Class in the 1800s by Cindy Sankowski. My name is Vanessa Chappins and I am the Public Archaeology Coordinator at the San Diego Archaeological Center. Just a few announcements before we get started. This Saturday, February 4th, in the center classroom, we will be having our pop-up art exhibition featuring local artists' work and still life painting workshop taught by Jean Wheat from Open Art Studio. Registrations for still life painting workshop can be found on our website. Also, Saturday, February 11th at Ranchos Penasquitos Adobe, located in San Diego, we will be celebrating the Los Penasquitos bicentennial. I hope you can all join us. Our next living room lecture is February 22nd, and we will welcome author Belle Colson to talk with us about history and mystery, one family's writing journey. A signed copy of their book will be available for purchase. You won't want to miss this presentation. Details on this and other information about the center, our curation efforts, and programs can be found online at sandiegoarchaeology.org. Tonight, we will be using the Q&A feature. You can find it on your Zoom control panel. Feel free to submit questions at any time, and they will be answered at the end of the presentation during the moderated Q&A. I am very pleased to introduce Cindy Sankowski. Her personal commitment is to continue to have a positive impact in the community by making new ideas and information accessible in the museum setting. She has been working with the San Diego Archaeological Center since 1996, leading the effort to preserve our archaeological legacy. Block 112 in downtown San Diego reflected the same urban diversity that was typical of large eastern cities. This presentation reveals clues about the residents' everyday lives and ambitions and lifestyle. Without further ado, Cindy.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Today is the first day of Black History Month, and it seems apropos to have this presentation now to remind us all of the diversity that has been present in San Diego since the very beginning. And diversity makes a stronger community. And I was very impressed with the work that was done by ASM affiliates. They're the archaeological team who excavated this area, and they did a really good job at doing some historic research as well. So I'm very happy to share this with you, and I'll get started. Vanessa, do you put the screen up or do I?
You can go ahead and put the screen. It's already ready to go for you.
Okay, all right, lovely, thank you. Here we go. The urban development projects that took place when Petco Park was built offered a unique opportunity to examine the lives of the working class in late Victorian San Diego. This is a group including ethnic minorities whose voice is hardly heard or misrepresented in the historical record. Their contribution to the development of San Diego was often underappreciated. This archaeological collection provides a window into the lives of San Diego's working class population during the 1880s. This small section of downtown San Diego reflected the same urban diversity that was typical of large eastern cities. Of the 50 residents on the block, 16 were white or African American. The other 34 were immigrants and ethnic minorities, including Chinese laundrymen, a Mexican mill hand, a French gunsmith, a German day laborer, a Welsh museum, a Japanese lunchman, and an Irish baker. The artifacts on Block 12 tell the story of an oftentimes misrepresented group in American history. The inner city working class survived the challenges of harsh living conditions, and they lacked the infrastructure that we take for granted today. In a search for prosperity, they settled into a new life on Block 12, yet they maintained a vital connection with their own heritages. The story of the working class on Block 12 informs us not only about the history of San Diego, but also what it means to be an American. I wanted to mention, when I say Block 12, This is the block number that was given to it by the Sanborn Map Company. Block 112 is located between J and I, which is now Island Street, and 6th and 7th Streets in downtown San Diego. The 1888 Sanborn map indicates that there were 2 Chinese laundries and a drying yard, a wagon storage garage, a horse corral, a cigar factory, a general merchandise store, 2 restaurants, and a shed for agricultural equipment, and new storefronts under construction. A very busy place indeed. The promise of growth resulting from a connection to the railroad attracted people from other states, as well as a wide variety of immigrants. In 1870, the population of San Diego was a mere 2,300. By 1886, it had risen to 12,000. A mere 2 years later, the population more than tripled, reaching 40,000. And they're all on the freeway when they're going to work, aren't they? The sudden population boom led to the densely packed urban environment that is seen in Block 112. It was located just 3 blocks from the dockyards and the notorious Stingaree district, with its disrespectable establishments such as opium dens, saloons, and brothels. Most of the artifacts found in Block 12 came from privies, wells, and trash pits. Before the city instituted trash pickup, it was common to use old wells and privies to discard of trash. The excavation of Block 112 revealed organic waste such as animal bones, shells, seeds, as well as broken ceramics, scraps of metal, and opium tins. And this is a view of one of the wells that was excavated. And you can see on the bottom there, kind of embedded in the mud, are some bottles and some crockery poking through. Although this practice of trash disposal was an invaluable source of information for archaeologists today, it created a public health crisis at the time. In addition, there was no sewer system, which led to outbreaks of diseases like cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis. Both Chinese and American medicine bottles were recovered, suggesting that each culture was dealing with the effects of the unsanitary living conditions in their own way. As a matter of fact, San Diego did not have regular trash pickup until the 1920s. Despite their cultural differences, the inhabitants of Block 112 live very similar lives. Their artifacts reveal that just like people today, these individuals were concerned with creating a stable, safe environment, forming a community, and finding economic prosperity. Understanding the lifestyle of the working class in the 1880s fills in the gaps in the history of the region. Just like today, there was quite a variety of cuisines available in San Diego in the Victorian period. The basic American fare included beef, pork, and fowl raised in the area. In addition, there was quite a variety of fish and shellfish on the menu. Here we see some clams, oysters, and scallops. Abalone was very popular in the Asian community, and there were plenty of fresh veg and fruits available. I think you can find an oyster in the bay today, and I probably wouldn't eat it if you did. However, there was no refrigeration, and condiments were your best friend when meat was a wee bit off. One popular condiment was invented in 1837 by 2 London dispensing chemists. Its ingredients include vinegar, molasses, anchovies, tamarind, garlic, and cloves. If you've guessed it already, it is Lee and Perrin's Worcestershire sauce. And these are the little lids that came from those bottles, and they're very dense. And so we find them by the hundreds at archaeological sites. So that would take the little bit of pong off your meat if it was a day or 2 old. There it is, Lee and Perrin's. Japanese cuisine was present on Block 112. This little dish was made to hold side dishes such as pickled veg or steamed buns. It is a typical merchant class tableware. The kamen or designs express general good luck wishes. Number 1 is an open parasol and 2 closed parasols. meaning hat. Number 2 is a pair of clothes, an aromatic spice. 3 is a fan. 4 is a depiction of a gold weight wishing wealth to the owner. 5 is a lucky sack. 6, a turnip, which is an auspicious symbol. And 7 is a gardenias, alluding to a good health. The blue willow pattern was actually conceived in Britain in the 1870s. The design employed both Chinese and Japanese motifs. In the blue willow legend, the beautiful daughter of a powerful man fell in love with her father's secretary. Discovering their love, the father banished the secretary and constructed a great fence to keep his daughter, my cat is screaming at me, sorry, to keep his daughter contained. She could only walk by the water and the willows. She despaired until she received a message from her lover. At a banquet, he rescued her, but her father noticed and chased them across the bridge. They got away, but years later, her father caught up with them. The secretary was killed and the daughter died as well. In pity, the gods turned them both to doves so they could fly away together. Really sad story. And kind of gruesome when you're thinking about that when you're eating your tea. All of the residents of San Diego enjoyed a tipple now and then. Here we see Chinese rice wine crock, Scottish ginger beer bottles, imported wine bottle, and a pumpkin seed flask for that quick sip of whiskey when you need it. In the days before antibiotics, patent medicines were all the rage. Many of these products were made by local chemists, but then became more widely available. One item that was available to the residents was Dr. King's remedy for consumption or tuberculosis. It contained, of all things, chloroform, morphine, and pine tar, none of which would be expected to ease lung disease. Dr. Hostetter's emerged in the market in 1853 and was sold as a medicinal tonic. He claimed that his secret formula of herbs forces off impure bile and purifies the system. He did not mention that it also contained 47% alcohol. I love the advert. When hundreds of women endorsed Dr. Hostetter's, there could be no doubt as to the cure. It probably didn't cure anything, but maybe you felt a little bit better after having a tipple. People in the 1880s, San Diego suffered with numerous eye problems. Not only were there infectious diseases, but homes were lit with whale oil lamps and heated with wood or charcoal, and that caused chronic irritation to the eye. Even the widespread availability of reading materials such as newspapers were blamed. Therefore, small bottles for eye wash and eye cups were a common find at Block 112. This product was put out by H.P. Wakely, an early day San Francisco pharmacist. It was a cosmetic lotion that was advertised not only to cure sunburn, poison ivy, insect bites, and prevent freckles, but it was also recommended as a toothpaste. The directions advise that you apply cameline thoroughly by means of a toothbrush of medium hardness. Cameline is not also an excellent cleanser, but tends to prevent tooth decay. Camelina sativa is a flowering plant grown in Europe and Asia. The oil produced from the plant is still used in products today. This is a woman, oh, I'm sorry, that, and there you see a bit of the plant there as well. This is what a woman might have had on her vanity table: a hand mirror, brush, a bone crochet hook, and a pot of Mason Doran face powder. This toothpaste, the cherry toothpaste, was only available in the UK. Thus, a Brit must have visited San Diego during this time. The toothpaste had nothing to do with cherries. It was actually colored in flavor with areca nut or betel nut. This palm fruit was chewed in India and southern China. It is very bitter and turned your teeth black and your lips bright red. It also had a mildly stimulating effect. Thus, one wonders why you would want it in a toothpaste. The toothbrush was made of bone, and the bristles would have been pig bristles. I told this to a group of kids visiting the center, and one little boy wanted to know if it tasted like bacon when you brushed your teeth. Mrs. Gervais Graham called herself a doctor, but really was a purveyor of toiletries. Her most favorite product was the gray hair restorer. It contained alcohol, borax, glycerin, and red pepper. However, it did not contain sugar, lead, sulfur. However, it also contained sugar, lead, sulfur, or mercury, 3 of which are really quite poisonous. Colgate was founded in 1806 by a British gent, William Colgate. He was living in New York at the time. They made soap and candles. In 1866, they branched out into perfumery. Colgate was famous for inventing the cashmere bouquet brand, which I remember my mother wearing. In 1896, toothpaste became a hot commodity, and they ceased perfume production to focus on dental care. Florida water was invented in 1880 by a New York perfumer. It was alcohol scented with lavender, and it was marketed for both men and women. It was very popular in barbershops as an aftershave, and it is still made today. Speaking of men, tobacco is widely used in all ethnicities. Here's a sample of the thousands of snuff bottles found in San Diego. Women of the time complained that it was impossible to keep the hem of your dresses from getting soiled whilst walking because there was tobacco spit all over the place. Smoking was practiced by both men and women. This clay pipe was mass produced in Ireland with a heart decoration. And there were quite a few of these were found at the site as well. Some luxury items were found on block 112. A silver-plated daguerreotype frame made by Scoville Manufacturing of Waterbury, Connecticut was unearthed. It's from 1880. At that time, it cost about 12 cents to get a daguerreotype, which doesn't sound like a lot, but a loaf of bread was 6 cents. And the average wage in 1880 for a 60-hour work week was about $9 for a laborer and $20 for a carpenter. So when I was researching this little frame, I happened across a photograph of Frederick Douglass with a similar kind of frame. So I thought that was kind of cool. The game Go was invented in China about 2,500 years ago. It soon became a strategy game throughout the world. It is actually quite complex, much like chess. These little clay markers prove that Go was played in San Diego as well. This is a little frozen Charlotte doll. These little dolls, or parts of them, are often found at historic archaeological sites because they are surprisingly sturdy. They are often baked into cakes and used as a bath toy. You may know them as frozen Charlotte dolls. The story goes that a stubborn young lady refused to wear a coat to cover her party frock and froze to death in a carriage that she was riding in. And this actually happened in Upper New York State in 1840. Counter to popular lore, the dolls were not called frozen Charlottes until the 1940s. Before that, they were known as penny dolls. In Britain, if you walk along the Thames, you can find a whole lot of these washed up with the rocks and what have you. So they must have been importing them and they got lost at sea or whatever. I'm sorry. The people who lived on Block 112 left behind intriguing clues about their everyday lives, not necessarily the big momentous moments, but nevertheless extremely important in understanding what their lives are really like. And here you can see a couple of probably very treasured items that show that even with very little money, you were always trying to make your home a nice place to live. And that's the end. And this is the backside of a little frozen Charlotte doll. And the word Nippon on there means Japan. So this was actually created before World War II. After World War II, items that were exported from Japan to the United States, all said Japan. And there's some information, and I'd be more than happy to take some questions. Dante?
Thank you, Cindy. My name is Dante Paranga, and I'm the Development and Marketing Director here at the San Diego Archaeological Center. I'll be moderating the Q&A portion of tonight's discussion. As a reminder, just like usual, you can submit your questions using the Q&A feature located on your Zoom control panel, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible. Let me see if we have anything in yet. And while we're waiting, I was just wondering, I know you had the prices on the daguerreotype frames, but what about some of those medicines and bottle and treatments? Do you have any idea how much those cost for the average person?
Some of them were very expensive, upwards of $1.
Oh, wow.
Mostly because, and they were sold by traveling salesmen most of the time, although there were a few apothecaries in San Diego who would stock those sorts of items. But I think one of the reasons that they were sold mostly by traveling salesmen was that they needed to get out of town when people discovered it really didn't work, or that it was sort of dangerous. But I don't think that they really meant to harm anybody. It was just lack of knowledge about, and there was no Federal Drug Administration to make sure that, ADA to make sure that you weren't taking something that wasn't good for you.
So were individuals getting ill from using these basically poisons?
They probably did. I know of one cosmetic cream that contained lead oxide to make your skin whiter. And of course, that's extremely dangerous. But I think people will be smart enough after a few tries to say, I'm going to give that up. It's not doing me any good, I don't think.
And we have a question. Are any of the descendants from this Block 112 still living in San Diego?
It's very difficult to determine because there were no formal censuses then. So I would love to find that out. It was such a long time ago, and the land changed hands, different properties so very many times. I did try and look into that though, and I couldn't, except for one shopkeeper's name, which was like Smith or something very common. I wasn't able to find anything. I have met people though that say that their family goes back to the 1800s, but most of them lived in rural areas on farms and things like that.
With the sewage issues back then, do you know what the usual lifespan would be for people at that time?
Probably into the 40s. If you made it to 60, that was a very long time, and you probably didn't have any teeth. So that was the general age. People got married early, had children early, and then I'm sorry, my cat's found a bag to get in. Can you hear that? Is it too loud? Benedict. he's just a troublemaker. But then, when the germ theory actually came about and people were able to have better hygiene, it dropped the death rate immensely. However, there was still a lot of infectious diseases there because vaccination hadn't been instituted yet.
Are there any hygiene concerns when excavating these latrines or trash pits?
Absolutely. So usually you wear gloves and a mask, and sometimes you wear a full, what we call a bunny suit. I've seen some sites where you actually were wearing a respirator, which and goggles, which gives you more protection. Some of those germs can live a long time.
And this is not a question, but just want to read off, someone said in the comments that the Chinese historian Murray Lee with the Chinese Historical Society may have some more information about families in the area that were still living in, that are still living in San Diego.
Yes, I met him. It's really wonderful. It's interesting I've consulted with them many times on some of the pieces of Chiniswa, some of the Chinese pottery and things that we found there too.
And so how typical was this block compared to other downtown blocks? Is this a standard example of
It
what
would be very typical. Unfortunately, when CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, was instituted in 1972, it requires that if you're going to build something, you have to assess that property to see if it has any natural or cultural resources that should be mitigated. And so before that, San Diego downtown, if they wanted to build something new, they just tore down a building and built it. So no excavations had actually taken place there until much later. So it's a shame, because it would have been nice to have more of a continuous record of, how people were living and what was happening down there. And Petco Park just provided a massive example of it because they needed to excavate so much around there.
Did any of the medicines shown tonight inspire other later medicines that are used today?
Yes, they did. People are always looking for something to cure a sick tummy and of course, beauty products. So they definitely, and of course, Colgate's still around. Colgate toothpaste is still around. And some of the perfumes actually are. I'm sure they're made a bit differently now. Before, perfumes were made with actual floral oils and what have you. And now it's mostly synthetic substances. But I haven't really done a study on how many names are still around. Of course, we have a lot more medicines today than we did back then.
And does the Archaeological Center currently have the artifacts from this excavation? And who pays
Yes, we
for
do. And some of them are actually on exhibit right now.
Cool. And who pays for its curation?
Well, it depends. Usually it's the landowner that has to foot the bill for that. So in this case, it was the city of San Diego that had to pay for that. And they give us a one-time fee, the San Diego Archaeological Center, a one-time fee, and we care for that material in perpetuity. And I'm happy to say that some scholars have come in to review this collection, looking for particular items, trying to complete a story on their end.
Did anyone do faunal analysis for Block 112?
Yes, it's very interesting because chicken bones are really quite rare. And the reason is you're not going to eat a chicken while it's laying eggs. And so usually when a chicken stopped laying eggs or just got old, that's when you ate it. You can tell butchering techniques. For example, saw marks indicate a Western trained butcher, whereas cleaver marks indicate Chinese or Japanese. So, and also the cuts of meats, you can determine value and in a way indirectly understand better the socioeconomic standing of the people that were eating that. Unfortunately, vegetal things don't really save that much, but the bone and shellfish there was a lot of quantities of that.
So speaking of socioeconomic finds, did the makeup and other of the beauty products the women were using on the site, does that indicate a certain level of wealth?
I think you splurge when you could, and you set your priorities. Of course, you're going to make sure there's food on the table and the kids are clothed, but everybody wants to look their best. So I think pennies were saved to get some of that material.
And at that time, were there any suburbs in San Diego?
Oh, really? They were very, very suburbs and farms most of the time. Those real suburbs didn't start till World War II, when there was such an influx of military people coming in that housing needed to be built for that. So many of like in Claremont, for example, maybe some of the older homes are from the 1940s, 1950s. And then as San Diego grew, we had such a great port, plus the military population kept increasing. San Diego got pretty spread out really quickly. I remember before 805 was built, and that was just a big open field out there. where the landfill is now.
So were any of the buildings from the Sanborn map still in existence, or was this all?
No, it was determined historically and by the evidence in the ground.
And what would you consider to be the most interesting artifact found from the site, and why?
Oh gosh. Well, I always say it's the last artifact I touched because they all tell such a story. But there was a beautiful cruet bottle which belonged to a cruet set, and so that was a real luxury item. And that would be, it's a little metal frame. It was probably silver gilt. And then there's usually 2 or 3 or 4 bottles in there that had your oil, your vinegar, other condiments that you would have with your dinner. And so that was a very interesting find. That might have been a hand-me-down, a family heirloom, something like that, but really pretty rare. And I really enjoyed learning about the Japanese and Chinese dishes and what all the iconography meant. It's said that with Chinese, traditional Chinese and Japanese tableware, they all tell a story, and they do. Really pretty exciting.
And what were the children's lives like at this time?
Well, we did find some toys, some lots of marbles, because they last forever. We found some doll parts, both, the kind of dolls that had the China heads and China arms, and the rest of it would have been fabric. They probably didn't attend school, or if they did they would just learn to read. And then they probably went to work at about 8, 9, or 10 years old during that time.
And were there any Native American artifacts excavated from the site?
No, there weren't. It could have, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It could have been that they were destroyed during the original occupation of the area, or it could be that they just weren't living there. There might not have been enough resources to sustain a population of Aboriginal people.
Just as a reminder, if anyone has a last few questions, please go ahead and drop them in the Q&A.
Good questions.
And since the cat suggested this question, was there any evidence of pets at the site?
Yes, there was a really a part of a dog collar. It was leather, and it had a little dog tag on it. And it was from a later date. It said San Diego City, 1927, and it had the number of the dog. So obviously they were issuing licenses then, but all the records were gone. I wanted to find the dog's name, but I never could find it. But that was pretty interesting. And I think there was a fishbowl. I'm not positive about that because it was very, the glass was thick enough, but I just couldn't tell for sure. And I don't really know how many people really kept fish during that time. But I'm sure there were loads of dogs around, both pets and just loose dogs.
And what inspired you to do research on this site?
Well, when the collection first came in, I was just astounded at the wealth of it and the variety. And I think this is one of the first large-scale excavations in this area that happened in San Diego. And, normally you find a quarter of what was in this collection. So it was nice to be able to compare across such a larger area and so many different cultures too.
All right.
And I just hate to think of the things that didn't survive, that were, that just don't last in the archaeological record.
Well, thank you, Cindy, and
You're very welcome.
And thank you everyone for attending tonight's living room lecture. Don't forget to join us later this month for our next living room lecture, History and Mystery, One Family's Writing Journey. For more information on our upcoming events, as well as membership, please visit our website, sandiegoarchaeology.org. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Good night.